This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
Ever-living God, open our ears and our hearts that we may better understand the mystery of your word. Our reading from Exodus seemed very appropriate and timely to me as I pondered our message for today. We find Moses tending the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro. He had followed the sheep through the wilderness and had reached the bottom of Mount Horeb. I am confident when I say I don't think Moses expected to have a conversation with God when he set out that morning. But before any words were spoken, God interrupted Moses' day and got his attention in a very spectacular way. It isn't every day that you encounter an angel that appears in the midst of a burning bush out in the desert. I was imagining Moses when he saw this phenomenon suddenly appear nearby. He does not respond with terror, but rather curiosity at this strange sight. I imagine him saying to himself, look at that. I better go check that out before I move on. Why does that bush not get burned up by the awesome blaze of fire? I can also envision Moses' astonishment when God spoke to him out of the burning bush. Moses, Moses. And how did Moses answer? This is participation. How did Moses answer? Here I am. And what did God say to Moses? Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. This was a liminal space for Moses, a transition time between who he was previously and who he was about to become. He did not know it, but his life was about to change in a radical, life-altering way. His status in the Israelite community was about to be redefined regardless of his insecurities and fears about being a leader to his people. It is no wonder that he was afraid and hid his face from God. This is the call and commission of Moses. First, God identified himself so Moses could be sure with whom he was speaking. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then he told Moses he had heard the cries of misery of his people in Egypt and had come to commission Moses to lead those people out of bondage. All he had to do was go confront Pharaoh to persuade him to let the Israelites go free. That's all. No big deal. Typical to most call stories, Moses questions his fitness and ability to undertake such a monumental task on behalf of his people. God reassured Moses when he said, I will be with you. So this morning, I want us to ponder Moses' initial response and God's reassurance to Moses. Here I am. I will be with you. Right now, we are in our own liminal spaces. You, the congregation of St. Paul in the Desert, are in one space, and Andrew and I are moving into another space. So this morning, I invite you to turn aside with me to examine our burning bush, which is in the midst of us. That bush is Andrew's retirement and our departure from the community. But before we begin, we need to remove our metaphorical sandals as we gather together here in the holy space to listen for God's call to us. 30 years is a long time for a priest to stay in one place. This has represented stability and continuity in the life and ministry of this congregation. Andrew has led by example in challenging us, the people of St. Paul's, to listen for all and respond to the needs of those in our own community, as well as the wider world outside our doors. Together, we have listened for God's voice calling to us to use our many resources in order to respond to the misery and pleading of God's beloved children. And in our gratitude for those resources, not the least of which is effective leadership, we have gathered weekly at God's table to be renewed and refreshed to continue our mutual ministry. We have also come together to commemorate and celebrate many events and milestones of our congregation. Weddings, funerals, birthdays, anniversaries, baptisms. All of these have given us the opportunity to come together and enjoy the companionship of each other. We have shared hospitality at barbecues, potlucks, and coffee hours. We have prayed, sung, cried, and laughed together. But most importantly, we have grown into our mission of being a welcoming, empowering, supportive community as a part of a diocese who dares to follow Jesus in his life of fearless love for the world. The liminal space for the congregation of St. Paul in the Desert is going to be purposefully taking time to turn aside and listen for God's call to you. This is an overwhelming and scary time for everyone as you begin the process of reimagining yourself apart from your priest and deacon. This will take the commitment and energy of everyone, not just the vestry and staff. You all have the unique gift of being a part of deciding what you want, first in your interim minister and then in your rector. While that discernment process continues, you also have the challenge of continuing the vibrant ministries of hospitality and social justice, which have characterized this congregation. The wider community has come to identify the Church of St. Paul in the Desert as a place of sanctuary, but also as leaders in the caring for those who cannot care for themselves. The liminal space for Andrew and I is equally as scary and full of unknowns. Unlike most people who retire, we have to begin to leave behind many of the relationships which have been the security and anchor for us for 30 years. Right now, I can't even imagine what our lives are going to be like. Like Moses, Andrew's status of rector of St. Paul in the Desert and community leader is about to change. When we leave here after church on April 7, we will be Andrew and Susan without a definite altar to call home. April 7 will be the fourth Sunday in Advent. The next Sunday will be Palm Sunday, and we will worship with the congregation of Trinity on the Hill in Los Alamos, New Mexico, where we were married 41 years ago. But Andrew will not be the preacher, and I will not prepare the table for communion. Both of our liminal spaces will be characterized by how well we can live with the grief we are experiencing. We need to resist the temptation of turning away too quickly from examining the burning bush and standing on this holy ground in our bare feet. The texture and feel of our grief should be fully appreciated. Now is the time to squish our toes around in the sacred soil of this uncomfortable space. We need to look for sticks and shiny pebbles and earthworms, as well as stickers and broken glass in the soil. It is also a time to quiet our fears and uncertainties so that we can be prepared to hear God's call for us. None of us have another opportunity to experience just this space ever again in our lives. This is a scary and overwhelming time for us all. Unlike Moses, we have had some warning that Andrew was nearing his time of leaving, and we were all about to reach a life-altering event. But like Moses, we all probably feel completely unprepared for the undertaking of our new challenge, because there is no script in order to find out how to live through this time. And intellectually, we know there are many good and exciting times ahead for all of us. But right now, it is hard to imagine feeling excited or enthused about the future, looming large out there ahead of us. However, we are all being called and commissioned for new ministry. God not only promised that he, the God of Moses' ancestors, would be with him as he took on this monumental task, but he also gave him a sign to guarantee his promise to Moses. After Moses had brought his people out of Israel, they would all worship God on Mount Horeb. I cannot tell you what our signs will be, which will seal God's promise to be with us always. But if we can borrow a page from Moses' playbook and take the risk to say, "Here I am," I am confident that we will all continue to hear our loving God say, "I will be with you."